This is Biology 1, Chapter 7, Part 2, Cellular Structure and Function. In this portion of the video screencast, we will be discussing the structure and function of organelles in the cell, as well as ways to transport things around the cell. Remember, organelles are the little organs, the structures inside a eukaryotic cell that perform the functions of the cell. So we will be going through all of those to learn their structure and function. If the cell itself is like a little factory, you can consider the cytoplasm to be like the air in the factory. It's everywhere. Cytoplasm in the cell isn't exactly fluid, but it's not exactly solid either. So we do kind of term it as semi-fluid. The cytoskeleton of the cell would be like the foundation of the cell factory and the walls and the floors and the ceiling of the cell factory. The cytoskeleton is a supporting network. It helps the structure of the cell. It also is a place for organelles to attach. The cytoskeleton is composed of two special types of proteins. The microfilaments help give the cell its shape and help the cell to move around. The microfilaments are kind of rod-shaped. They're a little more flexible. The microtubules, these are also part of the cytoskeleton. It helps push things around inside the cell. And these are a little more rigid, so they're in and provide structure to the outside of the cell. So again, if our cell is a factory, the cytoskeleton is the floors and the walls and the ceilings in the basement. Cell structures. So we're going to get kind of go into inside the plasma membrane. You will need to know for your unit test the structure and function of all of these organelles. The nucleus. Every good cell factory needs a boss, a CEO, if you will. The job of the nucleus, it is the managing structure. It's in charge of everything. It knows all and sees all. The nucleus, of course, the boss has to have an office. So the office is inside the nuclear envelope. And of course, there are doors for things to come in and out, or pores for substances to come in and out of the boss's office. So the nucleus is the main organelle in charge. Every cell factory will need some workers. The ribosomes are the workers that produce proteins for the cell. And that is the main #1 job of the cell factory, is to make and ship proteins. There are two types of ribosomes. Some are kind of free-floating. They make proteins for the cell and the cytoplasm. And other ribosomes are kind of stuck on an assembly line for making proteins. So we call those attached. Ribosomes are made of their own special type of RNA, ribosomal RNA, and protein. Ribosomes are not surrounded by a membrane. So these are some examples of our assembly line ribosome protein makers. Every boss needs a secretary or an assistant or a vice president, if you will, and that is the nucleolus. The nucleolus makes ribosomes for the cell. So in other words, the nucleolus would hire the workers for the cell. It's very dense region. It is inside the boss's office or inside the nucleus. So the nucleolus hires the workers, hires the protein makers, the ribosomes for the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, funny name, but it kind of acts like a conveyor belt in the factory. It provides a surface area where we get lots of chemical reactions taking place. Different types of proteins and carbohydrates are made and shipped to different places in the cell or to other cells. So the endoplasmic reticulum is like a conveyor belt in the factory. There's two types of endoplasmic reticulum. The smooth ER does not have any ribosomes, so there are no assembly line workers associated with this endoplasmic reticulum. Basically what the smooth ER does is it creates some carbohydrates and lipids for the cell. The rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is the assembly line with our assembly line workers. So this is where the ribosomes actually make their proteins. The Golgi apparatus is a packager of sorts. It modifies and sorts and packages proteins. And the packaging that they use is called a vesicle, which in Latin means bubble. The Golgi apparatus, to me, I guess, kind of looks like a flattened stack of membranes, kind of like a stack of weirdly shaped pancakes. So the Golgi apparatus is kind of like the shipping and handling department in the Cells R Us factory. Vacuoles. These are very, very tiny in animals, if they have them at all, but vacuoles are very large in plant cells. Their job is to temporarily store stuff, either nutrients or waste. Vacuoles have a membrane surrounding them, and again, they're kind of like, you can think of the vacuole is like the storage closet or the supply closet for our cell factory. Things are held there temporarily, and they're used or gotten rid of when needed. The lysosomes. These are digestive organelles. They will get rid of old cell parts, any waste that's produced in the cell, or if your cell is invaded by foreign objects such as bacteria or viruses, the lysosome will digest them. They're small but mighty. They have very powerful digestive enzymes inside their membrane. So the lysosome is kind of like the janitorial or the maintenance crew of the Cells R Us factory. They clean up all the stuff so we can keep our factory running efficiently and effectively. Centrioles. These are in animal cells only. They help the cell divide. They are made of microtubules, and really the only time centrioles work at the Cells R Us factory is when they're about to upgrade and to build another factory. So they act to move the blueprints of the factory, how to build the new cell factory. They carry those and they show them where to go. So they're kind of like the air traffic controller person on the runway at the airport waving the planes in. The mitochondria, this is the powerhouse of the cell. This mitochondria provides the cell with energy by converting sugars. The mitochondria is a double membraned organism, so there's a lot of surface area for the breakdown of sugar, which is how cells get their energy. So you can think of the mitochondria as like the power plant of our cell factory, or the electrical engineer of the cell factory. Now, chloroplasts, these are exclusive to plant cells. These are like solar panels for our plant Cells R Us factory. They collect solar energy and convert that with a little bit of water to sugar for food. And we will kind of concentrate on these a little bit more in a later part of this unit. So the chloroplasts are like the solar panel of the plant Cells R Us factory. Cell walls are also exclusive to plants and bacterial cells. These are rigid. They're made of a material that's called cellulose. It's a very common sugar. Cell walls are not found in animal cells. Plant cells also have a cell membrane or a plasma membrane, but they also have this added support of the cell wall. So it makes it a little more rigid. Some companies are lucky enough to have a mobile office. The cilia and flagella help with cellular locomotion or movement. For some cells that are, for example, unicellular or a bacterial cell, can help them move around in watery environments. They're made of microtubules. Cilia are found all over the plasma membrane. They're kind of hair-like projections. And flagellas are a long whip-like tail. And they are pre-programmed to constantly move. cells don't have a real brain, so they don't know where they're going. So the cilia and flagella are just pre-downloaded to constantly be in motion. So they're kind of the mobile office. They can move the cell to wherever it needs to be. So cellular transport, a couple of different types. Passive types of transport are called passive because they don't require any energy or any extra energy by the cell to move particles. Diffusion is when particles will move from an area where there's a lot to where there's not so many. Diffusion takes place naturally. This will eventually result in what we call dynamic equilibrium. So in a cell, everything is still moving around. It's still going all around in the cell, but there's no change in concentration of anything. Things that can affect diffusion, concentration of the substance. The more there is, the longer that will take to diffuse. Temperatures. Generally, the higher the temperature, the faster the diffusion rate will occur. Pressure. Also, the higher the pressure, the faster the diffusion rate. And the size and the charge of particles. Larger particles, of course, take longer to diffuse. And if you happen to have opposite charges of things that are diffusing, that will also take a little more time. Another type of passive transport that doesn't require much energy by the cell is facilitated diffusion. When you facilitate someone, you're helping someone. So these are special transport proteins that kind of escort substances across the plasma membrane. So it kind of acts like a crossing guard with the little ones helping them cross the street. Osmosis is another type of passive transport. The only difference between osmosis and diffusion is osmosis is water molecules moving from where there's a lot to where there's not so many. We can talk about cellular solutions when we talk about osmosis and diffusion. An isotonic cell, iso means the same. So isotonic will have the same concentration of water or solutes or ions, what have you. The cell will stay in its normal shape in an isotonic solution. Cells want to be in an isotonic solution. An isotonic solution is homeostasis for a cell. Hypotonic solutions. That's when the concentration of things outside the cell are lower than they are inside the cell. Now, the cell's not going to retain its shape. It is actually going to swell or burst in cytolysis because water molecules will also move from where there's a lot to where there's not so many. So in a cell in a hypotonic solution, too much water gets in and the cell can essentially pop. Sorry for that interruption there. A hypertonic solution is where the concentration of solutes is going to be higher outside of the cell. Hyper means more or above. Hypo means less or lower. Iso means the same. So in a hypertonic solution, the cell will not retain its shape. It will actually shrivel up due to plasmolysis. So the water in a hypertonic cell will leave and the cell will shrink. Active types of transport. This is when substances are moved against a concentration difference. So the cell's going to have to put in energy for this. A particular type of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump. This is found in the plasma membrane. It helps maintain salt and potassium concentrations, especially in your muscle cells. So 3 sodium atoms go out and 2 potassium atoms go in. Now, to get some larger things in and out of the cell, we can move those into by endocytosis. Endo means inside. A particular type of endocytosis is phagocytosis, which literally translates into cellular eating. So this is solid molecules into the cell. Penocytosis is cellular drinking. So this is bringing solutions into the cell. And exocytosis is moving cells